When you ask someone to name the most legendary and influential Sony headphone, most will default to the obvious and unparalleled MDR-R10. Maybe a few others might mention the MDR-7 from the peak of the Walkman era, and even fewer will bring up the MDR-V6 and get really close to the correct answer, which is of course the MDR-CD900, which was released in the same year as the V6 in 1985, but unlike the V6, which started the global revolution in studios around the world, the CD900 was the original Japan-only model. Not to be confused with the CD900 ST, which has been in production since 1989 and is still available today. The CD900 has a few differences that set it apart from all of its siblings, which is including but not limited to the V6, CD700, V7, 7506 and the CD900 ST. I say not limited to because there were several special editions and limited broadcast models that I won't go into. The single biggest difference between the CD900 and its siblings is the amorphous diamond plasma deposition coating on the driver diaphragm, which none of the others received. The only other big difference that no other models share is that the black plastic parts have a glossy finish, which also has a sort of pearlescent glittery quality to it. With that out of the way, let's take a quick look inside. One thing of note is that the original CD900 does not have the rear damping present, as in the later ST version. Looking at the driver's diaphragm, there is a very subtle dull sheen on the surface, but it is not as obvious as it is on other diamond-coated drivers I've seen, such as the MDR-Z900 or CD999. Actually, one thing I'm really curious about is comparing this directly with the DRS100 Budokan driver, which I suspected as being a modified CD900 driver. While I was close, it seems there are more differences than I originally guessed. Aside from the rear port being covered up, which I mentioned in my DRS100 video, I was right about them sharing the exact same housing. The color of the magnet housing, the foam color and density, almost everything about it appears to be near enough to identical. There are, however, two differences. The first being the D printed on the back of the CD900 driver, which obviously stands for diamond. Truthfully, I have no idea what this indicates, but it's a nice coincidence at least. The second difference is much more difficult to see. When moving the drivers back and forth in the light, the CD900 diaphragm has a colorless and slightly frosted appearance. The DRS100 has an iridescent green and purple sheen. While it's great to receive confirmation that these are indeed very different drivers, the mystery of the DRS100 driver only deepens, especially given that iridescence is extremely rare to see on driver diaphragms, with only one other known instance found in the Panasonic HD10. Every Sony studio monitor headphone looks so similar that it feels like there's no way that they can sound so different. For example, when reading or hearing about the differences between the Sennheiser HD580, 600 and 650, and then finally when you hear them for yourself, it kind of becomes a meme because of how similar they all sound and just how incremental the differences between them are. This is not the case with Sony's studio headphones. They each have distinct tonal personalities that are not measured in changes below 1 decibel or depending on the age and wear of their earpads. Using modern references, the CD900 ST is like the neutral, pleasant middle ground with the rolled off bass and treble. It puts the focus on the mid-range and emphasizes clarity. The 7506, on the other hand, is the V-shaped fun version with boosted extremes and a response that emphasizes highest and lowest details. The original CD900 is actually extremely close to the original V6. And also they are both more like the CD900 ST, but with slightly better extension without becoming as potentially fatiguing as the 7506. I can totally understand why this has become something of a holy grail among Sony studio headphone collectors, not just because of its rarity. It has a more organic smoothness in the tone that is more forgiving of the music and just sounds more enjoyable, like a headphone for actually listening to music rather than a studio tool. I think that might actually make it better for some studio or monitoring applications where tone is more important than hearing every detail. Its age is also showing. It doesn't have the same detail retrieval as the modern counterparts, but it's so close behind that it doesn't matter, and neither do I think it's that relevant, as the CD900's strength is in its near perfect tone. This, I think, is exactly why the CD900 and V6 are still sought after today. Subjectively speaking, however, I think the soundstage is really tiny, and it's not exactly saved by its slightly better than average imaging either. I think all the research and development went into the tonal response of the mid-range, so the sub-bass extension and texture also feels weak and distant. Later this was improved by the titanium-coated driver of the V7, which shares a very similarly boosted and textured bass, as in the 7506. It also lacks treble extension and any sense of air. There is clearly a strong veil over the top end, which isn't super distracting, but if you're accustomed to large, high-end open-back headphones, it's quite an obvious flaw that can be found in most small closed-back headphones, which at the very least makes it something more forgivable. To wrap up, I think the only reason to ever get a CD900 is if you are a determined collector of Sony studio headphones, or studio headphones in general. They are rarer than average, and similar or better sound quality can be found in the V6, the 7506, the MDR-R1, CD900 ST, and the JVC HA-MX100Z. So for the average headphone enjoyer, there is no clear discernible reason to hunt this one down. Out of all the Sony studio headphones I've owned or tried out, it's really great to finally have the grandfather in my hands and give it a proper listen. But there wasn't the aha moment or grand swelling of emotions that I somehow expected or hoped for. It is still no doubt a great headphone, and its legacy of influence on the audio industry has been immeasurable. But side by side among today's giants, it's fine to sometimes just put it to bed. That's it for now. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.